Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this stream. Today we're going to be talking about audio busing and routing in DaVinci Resolve. So I have really enjoyed kind of dipping my toes into DaVinci Resolve and Fairlight and learning a whole new piece of software over the past, I don't know, probably 6 months, I think. And the routing capabilities in it are a little different than Pro Tools or what, a lot of professional audio post-production veterans, I guess, would be used to using, but it's actually not that different. So we're going to get into kind of like the details of how to use routing and busing in DaVinci Resolve. We're going to take lots of questions, so please feel free, like in the middle of the stream or on the replay, just leave a comment or ask a question. There probably will be things that I don't know the answer to, because I'm coming from Pro Tools, so there's some things that change over and some things that don't. But we're going to get through this and kind of explore the capabilities in DaVinci Resolve of routing for pretty complex projects. So let us go to screen share here. We've got Alexander Edits from California, and we have a German, an Aleman, as we would say. Awesome. I was born in Germany, so that's cool. And then we've got Greece. We're worldwide. This is awesome. So just to show you kind of what's been going on in our members-only Discord, if you join the YouTube channel as a member, you get access to this. This is a members-only space, and I've been developing this plugin that has, I've been super lucky. Members have actually been helping me test this. I've gotten this in the hands of people with Pro Tools, DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Premiere, and gotten some good feedback on it. So yeah, the user interface is changing a little bit, but I'm hoping within a couple weeks I'll have this plugin wrapped up and ready to go out into the world. So I'm really looking forward to that. In DaVinci Resolve here, we are going to be talking about pretty complex busing and what buses are and what they do, what they can't do. So yeah, like I said, any questions you have, let me resize this a little bit. It's a little ridiculous. We need to read the chat, but we don't need it to be so big. Okay, so before we dive into that, into the DaVinci Resolve side of things, let's just kind of talk about what busing and routing is. So the biggest thing I see with picture editors or people who maybe come from a picture editing background, and also people who are just starting out with audio post-production, is everything just goes out one channel or bus, track, whatever is in your flavor of editing software. All the tracks just feed into the main outputs, which is fine if you're not looking to process things differently. Maybe you only have like voice tracks, so that's fine. But once you get into needing to deliver things professionally or create audio deliverables or just process things differently, maybe you want to process the dialogue as a bus, or the music, you want to globally EQ the music, or you need to make a dialogue and a music stem because you're not sure if the music will change in 10 years. Then you really need to think about busing. And busing, I like to explain it like a tree. And so you've got your main trunk here, which is your master, your output, your main output, your stereo mix bus, whatever you want to call it. This is the trunk of the tree. And so these big branches are stem or buses. So you might have like a dialogue and a sound effects and a music and whatever, voiceover. So these all feed into this trunk, and then on these individual stems you have tracks. So one stem might have 50 tracks, or might have 4 tracks, or 20, or 100, or 200. It doesn't really matter, but the point is that things are logically laid out so that all the dialogue tracks go to the dialogue bus, all the sound effects tracks go to the sound effects bus, all the music tracks go to the music bus. And these buses feed into the master bus, your main or mix bus. So this is important for a couple reasons. The first reason is for just organization, you know, for having the dialogue tracks separate from the music tracks. But the second reason is for versioning, processing, archiving the project. If you're not keeping the, you're probably keeping the edit project, but regardless, you want to archive the project. You want to have a video master, like a texted and textless probably, and then you want to have audio stems, because this might go somewhere and the person doesn't have DaVinci, or they have a newer or older version of DaVinci, or they're on Premiere. They need to be able to access something of your project that has some flexibility for dubbing in different languages, or for versioning, maybe cut downs, like maybe it's a 90-minute feature and it needs to be cut down to 60, or for making trailers. Like, there's all kinds of reasons to have your dialogue, music, and sound effects separated into buses. But just from the standpoint, I got a phone call this morning. I'm guessing that's going to be spam. Just for the sake of processing, and especially levels, audio levels, it's really smart to have things separated into buses. So if there's any questions on just the idea behind buses and how they feed into stuff, another way I've seen people describe this is like ocean, river, creek, you know, or stream. You have like a flow of water. That's a really good way to think about things, because really audio is just electricity. And so electricians like to think in terms of flow. So yeah, if there's any questions on just the overall idea behind busing, feel free. Like, I try to not go too fast, but my nature is just to blow through stuff. So, okay. Now, in Resolve, we have this kind of mix session template, whatever you want to call it. And you've got your tabs here at the bottom of DaVinci, like the, edit, fast edit, fusion, color, and then Fairlight tab. So for all things audio, it's really smart to work in the Fairlight tab. It's really built for audio. Now, if I kind of show you how my tracks are organized, this is based on a mix template that I have on my website. So if you want to just get organized, up and running really fast, grab that DaVinci Resolve timeline template. It has all these tracks organized for you so that you don't have to set it up from scratch. But I did have somebody ask specifically for a video on routing, so that's why we're talking about it. So the top section, I've got dialogue. This is going to include production sound, ADR, FUTS tracks, voiceover, and I like to include the PFX just because it's production sound. Next, we have a music section, and these are spaced with these spacer tracks. These are disabled tracks that have XXX on top. They're like visual spacers, basically. So here's all the music. This is score, source music, that kind of stuff. Next, we've got Foley and sound effects and backgrounds. And then down here is kind of what we're talking about. This is a bus section. So you see XXX bus, and then I've got dialogue, music, and sound effects, 5.1 bus, a mix 5.1 bus, an M&E 5.1 bus, and then I have these same 5 buses copied right here, 2.0, so stereo. I also have an additional mix for the web mix, because I want to mix this in one project for theatrical and for web at the same time. I've also got some reverbs, and then I've got VCA. So this, I like to quarantine the bus to either the bottom or the top of the session, project, the window basically, so that I can scroll down real quick and, mess with things, check it out, adjust however I need. But DaVinci is cool because coming from Pro Tools, it's not too different as far as like conceptualizing this. This works really well in Fairlight. So it's been kind of a smooth transition for me as I've, learned what I can about DaVinci and Fairlight. The biggest problem is the way you have to set these up in Fairlight is up here in the Fairlight tab. So you have bus format, and you add bus. This is the basic gist of setting up the buses. So you click add bus, add as many buses as you need to, change the format. It's probably going to be stereo for most of you guys, but if you're doing 5.1 or 7.1, you can, add that. But I like to have dialogue, music, sound effects, a mix, and an M&E. For those of you who don't know what an M&E is, it's a music and effects. This bus is going to include the sound effects and music, but not the dialogue. So the M&E is for dubbing, which dubbing is going to change with AI. It's already getting changed. But right now, an M&E deliverable for a real project, it's just one of the requirements. So then we have the stereo, the web bus, which is an additional aux, and then we've got some reverbs. We have a mono and a 5.1. When I'm mixing a bigger project, will have multiple mono reverbs and multiple 5.1, but Fairlight doesn't like too much processing, I've noticed. A 90-minute feature in Fairlight is going to be kind of janky feeling, and beach ball, you're going to get beach balls. So, keeping it to just a few reverbs is really smart. So that is how you add buses. So you would add here, and then the next thing you can do is assign the buses. So this is where you can do this in two different places. So if you have all these dialogue tracks, for example, you can see I've got them sent to my reverbs, but they're going out bus 1. And in Fairlight, or DaVinci, both really, things default to just being bus 1. That's just where, like, if you're opening a new project and you're not doing any routing at all, stuff just goes out bus 1. So I'm using bus 1 as my dialogue bus. And then you can see down here I've got the music going to bus 2. The PFX are going to bus 3, which is my sound effects. And how you can tell that is up here on buses. This is where you can basically hook things up. It's kind of like a patch bay. So you can turn them on and off here. And then, so music is going out bus 2. And then Foley and sound effects are going out bus 3. Down here, I've got, this is where it starts to get complicated. And that's why having a template that you can just grab and start from is kind of nice, because setting this up can take a while, especially if you haven't done it very much. So then I have dialogue, music, and sound effects. These are going to bus, they're all going to bus 4. So if we go up here and look at where bus 4 is, that's my mix bus. Great. Additionally, the dialogue is going out bus 6. Bus 6 is a stereo down mix bus. Okay? So the 5.1 dialogue bus is feeding not only the print master, but also the stereo down mix for the dialogue stem. That's how you get this one. So then music, similar, it's going to the main mix. It's also going to the M&E, which is B5. And then it's going to B7, which is the, you guessed it, stereo music bus. So it's a down mix from the 5.1. Similarly, the sound effects 5.1 is going out to the mix, M&E, and the stereo sound effects bus. So then the mix and M&E, they're not going anywhere. They're going out to my monitor so I can listen to them. The dialogue, music, and sound effects bus, these are getting routed to, all three are going to B9, which is the stereo mix bus. The, let's see, stereo music and stereo sound effects are going to B10, which is the M&E stereo. And then you'll see this mix 2.0. This is my stereo mix bus. This is feeding to B11, which I have to scroll down to, which is the web mix bus. This is boosted. This is boosted up to where if I mix my main mix to be -24, the web mix will be about -16. So it's about 8 dB hotter using compression and limiting. So now we get to the reverbs. Dialogue reverb goes to dialogue bus. Music reverb goes to music bus. Sound effects reverb goes to sound effects bus. And then same with the stereo ones. I have a mono and a stereo and a 5.1 verb for all those. So, wow, that's a lot. Sorry about this being just word salad, but routing is very complicated, and it definitely is confusing. It's not super well understood. So just bear with me. Like I said, we'll get through this. While you can assign buses in the Bus Assign tab in Fairlight, you can also assign them on the Mix page. So you can see here, this left panel is my tracks and the right panel is the bus. So I've got my dialogue, and you can, one thing to notice is for the dialogue tracks, the bus sends are going to the reverbs. So that's how you adjust how much reverb is going to play, is you automate it. But to assign the outputs on here, you can go here to bus outputs on the tracks and click the plus, and then you can assign them to your bus. So that is how you do it on this page, which for a lot of people might be better because you can actually see the tracks. And then it's the same as what I talked about in the bus assign. It's the same exact thing, it's just a different visualization of it. Maybe a little easier because you can kind of see the colors and everything. So yeah, that is the basics on routing in so much. That's such a dense thing compacted into, like, 15 minutes. So yeah, really dry stuff. But some of you requested it, and it's something I haven't seen covered a lot. So just to kind of go back to the tree, this is what we've just covered: the dialogue stem, sound effects, and music going to a master. So one thing I didn't show, however, was, and I had a person have an issue with this. So if you want this type of work already done for you, let me actually pull this up on my website. There's a guy I know who made some templates that you could check out, and the guy is me. And so I've got all this routing stuff done for you here. You can get the 5.1 stereo and web mix template, which is what we're working on right here. This is exactly what you'll get. You won't get the media, and you might not get like the stereo VO tracks, but you're going to get all the routing taken care of with this template right here. So if you're doing 5.1 mixing, and you're having to do audio post in DaVinci Resolve, this is what you need. This has all the routing, has basic plugin settings taken care of for you. You basically just open the timeline, set your settings, and then you can do multi-bus outputs and all kinds of stuff. So super useful for that. If you're just doing web stuff, YouTube videos or web commercials, the stereo mix template is just a smaller version of the 5.1, and it's $10. But all the routing's taken care of. So if you need to output stems, you need to process the stems differently, there you go. So that's my Billy Mays sales pitch for you guys, and I will just leave it at that. So yeah, setting this up yourself is really smart, because if you need to troubleshoot or you need to tweak things, it's ready for you to do. If you want to listen, and this is something that there's probably a way to change this in DaVinci, but the monitor section here, so where you got your dim and your volume and all that, this is where you decide what you're going to listen to. So if you are just opening a project from scratch, it's going to say like bus 1, listen to it on the main speakers. If you have a session setup like this with complex routing, you can audition stems, you can audition the mix, you can audition the stereo mix, the 5.1 mix, the M&E, the web mix. You can choose what you listen to just by changing this. So it's pretty handy. Like, this is something that kind of, to me, has Pro Tools beat a little bit, because it's just up here. Like, it stays in your monitor section. So yeah, that is how you would listen. If you do get one of these templates from my website, just make sure that you are listening to the mix and not just the dialogue bus. So, and if you're setting this up yourself, make sure you're not just going B1 for everything. B1 is just bus 1. So you can totally switch what it does. You can change the name. It's really cool. Like pretty much limitless as far as what you can do in DaVinci Resolve with routing. So yeah, I think that, let me just consult my notes real fast. I'm pretty sure I covered what I wanted to. So if you guys have questions, now's a great time for it. We've been talking for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So this is, yeah, so this all assumes you guys are using FlexBus, you know. So we talked about that, the formats, assigning buses, routing them. We talked about, yeah, routing them in DaVinci Resolve with that, you know, doing it on this page. We talked about that. That was good. Let's see, what else? Reverb. Okay, so let's talk about reverb. Reverb buses are super handy. You know, let's say you had a single line that needed to sound like it was down a hall. With Fairlight, you can automate the reverb up, you know. So you bring this up and you just play it, and then bring that up, and then you'd have more reverb. The way reverbs are routed is you need separate reverbs for each stem. So dialogue reverb, music reverb, and sound effects reverb. This one should actually be over here. I fixed this in the template that's on my site, but I didn't do it to my mix for this short. So these all need to be routed to their respective stem. You don't have your sound effects reverb going to your dialogue stem. Instant fail from QC. So make sure these are routed correctly. But these are nice because not only can you automate the level going to the reverb bus or aux, whichever you want to call it, both are correct. But you can also automate the return level. So you can bring the level up, you can bring the level down, you can pan the reverb, you know, around the room. A lot of creative things you can do with sends and returns in DaVinci Resolve. So that was a good one to cover. Automating, I covered that. Signal flow, headphone. I mean, okay, so routing to audio interfaces. This will vary based on what you have for your interface. If you go to patch input output, you can assign sources to destinations with what you're using for your control room. I'm using an Audient Auria interface. You might be using headphones, you might be using built-in speakers, AirPods, you know, home stereo, whatever. Like, the important thing is to, if you're especially doing 5.1, patching speakers to the correct output on your interface. And so that's going to vary based on whatever interface you have. I don't know what you got. Tell me what you got, and I can probably be more specific. Okay, color coding, that's something to touch on real fast. Color coding buses is really smart. In DaVinci, there's not a ton of colors, which is a little bit irritating. But, you know, this in the bus assign is where I assign colors to the buses and just make it logical. You know, I like green for dialogue, and then keep your bus and your mix down bus and your reverb, like try to keep it somewhat consistent. Looks like we have a couple questions. When you send your 5.1 to the stereo bus, is Fairlight down mixing? Yes, Fairlight does down mix. Do you send individual tracks to a reverb and then the return to the respective stem? A dialogue track to a dialogue reverb and then return to the dialogue stem. Brandon, that is exactly correct. That is exactly correct. If I was going to draw, maybe I can draw this. Sure, that's fine. Oh, that's going to look really gross. No, that doesn't look good at all. Let's make this a little bigger. Oh, this is a pen, that's why. Let's do a paintbrush. Blur, we don't need blur. So a good way to look, this is going to be not healthy for the tree. But a good way to look at the reverb is like a parallel bus. So it does need to come back into the bus, but it's outside of it. You know, like you're sending the tracks to the reverb, and then it needs to rejoin the stem before it gets to the main mix. You know, that's kind of a terrible illustration, but you get the idea. Supercloud asks, well, first says, hello from Romania. Very nice tutorials. Can you do a video about mixing and mastering at Netflix levels or any other standard level in Fairlight? Yes, I will get to that. We don't master an audio post, we just mix. So mastering is a music process, not a film process. Good question, though. Oh, you couldn't see what I was doing. That's not good. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so let me just draw that again. So a dialogue send will be like that. It's a parallel deal. It's not like in line with the bus. It goes outside to a reverb plugin and then back to the stem before it reaches the master. What you don't want to do is do this, you know, because then the reverb is not connected to your stem. The reverb needs to be included with the stem. So good question. Do you go back and do a totally separate mix for down mixes? No, I don't like to do that. I like the 5-1 in stereo mix to be basically copies of each other minus the panning. So great question. Okay, color coding. Okay, bus loops. You don't want to loop stuff, like you don't want to have a bus feeding itself. You'll get feedback. Gain staging is important. The other thing that's pretty important to do with buses is some limiting. And if I scroll to both the downmix buses and the regular 5-1 buses, you'll see I've got a limiter here that is limiting to -2 true peak. This is kind of like the standard safe limiting spec. Always check your spec sheet if there is one for, you know, what they want the true peak. Some will want it like -6. You can actually just type it in, it's easier. Some will want -4, but -2 is kind of like the gold standard vanilla, don't let it clip setting. So it's important to have limiters at the end of your buses. So if you have a compressor, make sure the limiter is like down in the chain. You know, you don't want to do like, oh, not a limiter. Oh, that's all they have for, that's interesting. Multi-band compressor, okay, that's right. So you don't want to do this. You don't want to have the limiter first, then the multi-band compressor. You want it to be, the limiter is kind of like the gatekeeper at the end, saying, no, you shall not pass. So that is important. And then what else? Gain staging, we talked about that. So once you get a template set up, if you like it, save it. Save it as a preset. If you're in DaVinci Resolve, make sure you export the timeline and call it like whatever. You know, the other thing you can do is I think you might be able to save it as a default project type of deal, but I'm not sure. I haven't tested that too much with like, you know, starting a project with this kind of thing. I really think you need to start with the timeline for this to work. So save it as a DRT, open it, and then start importing your stuff. You know, if it's your footage, great. If it's you're working on somebody else's project, then start with your template and then import into the template. That's a pretty important thing to do. So we got a couple more questions in the chat. Let's see. What are you using for meters in Fairlight? Good question. So I like to, in here, the loudness tab, if you click the 3 dots, you can change what meters you're using. I really like the Netflix spec for meters because it uses dialogue gating, and that's kind of the main thing I'm interested in. You can switch to BS 1770-4, which is LUFS for the entire program, but make sure this is set correctly. what you're monitoring, because if you don't, you might have a bad time. Like if you're just monitoring the dialogue, then yeah, you're not going to be, I mean, let's just see where this is at on loudness.
If you don't want to sell, I get.
Oh, let me mute my, you guys don't want to hear that coming through my microphone. I just want to see. Yeah, so without even really doing much mix-wise, it's already pretty close, you know, minus 22. Let's go to like the dialogue at the end. Oh wait, no, that's not the dialogue. Just kind of check. Yeah, so we're averaging minus 24, minus 25 without me touching anything on the mix. So that means the sound editor did a really good job. Yeah, so great question. I like to do the either Netflix or the BS1770-4. The BS1770-4 is going to measure the integrated level of all material in the mix. So it's looking at just levels for everything, dialogue, music, sound effects, whatever you got. The Netflix spec, you'll see if I switch to this, it has a dialogue, has a short max, and has an integrated. So you should be able to get like all the numbers, you know. The integrated level is minus 23. It's kicking in with the dialogue percentage there. So that kind of gives you an idea of the percentage of the dialogue, and then the range and loudness units. This is how dynamic your mix is. So the range from quietest to loudest. And then you have short-term max and just kind of a short-term. This is usually like a 3-second window. But don't get too caught up in this. Like, don't mix with your eyes. You really want to mix with your ears. That's super important. And people get so caught up in plugins and meters and what level. Like, that's great. But the most important thing is that the mix sounds good, stuff is balanced, and you can hear everything that needs to be heard. So yeah, don't get too caught up in the meters and what they're doing. I mean, there's not, how many people? It seems like we don't have that many people. Yeah, we don't have too many people on the stream. I kind of did it like, I was out camping, so I was like, oh shoot, it's Tuesday, I gotta do my thing, and I didn't set it up the night before because I was literally in the woods. So I'm glad to be here with you guys, but kind of a short stream, I guess. Please, if there's any questions, just chuck them out there, because I really like user input, and it helps me kind of answer the questions that need to be answered. So right now I think I'm done with what I needed to cover with routing. Trying to think if there's anything else that would be useful to talk about with routing. I guess we could check out and see. I don't think there's a way to do I guess you can you do routing in the edit page? I don't think so. Oh, this draggy thing makes me crazy. Whatever. Yeah, so this is the edit tab, and you can see I can pan and I can kind of look at the plugins, but I cannot assign or change routing, it looks like. Maybe in the inspector I can. No, the only thing I can change in here is what I'm monitoring. So if I want to listen to the stereo dialogue, I can do that, or the stereo mix, the web mix. But it looks like I cannot change the routing on the edit page, which is fine. Once you switch to audio and you're doing audio post-production, you want to be in Fairlight anyways. Just checking the chat for anything I didn't cover. Toronto, Ontario, that's cool. Ciao, I'm guessing Ricardo's from maybe Brazil or Portugal. Is it possible to make a subpath and a surround bus? Oh, I think I know what you're talking about, Simon. Yes, so a subpath meaning like a .lfe on yeah, like an individual channel subpath. I don't think you can do that. So that's something where Pro Tools definitely has DaVinci licked. But let's check it out. I think, yeah, I don't think you can do it here. The source bus output. Let's see what happens with this. No, you can't link it up there. So I would guess that's something you cannot do, which is interesting. A good example of that is if I wanted a sound effect to just go to the LFE, you know, maybe I'd want this sound effect to go to the LFE, this mono track. You would have to do it probably with the panner, I would guess. Because if I go here and I try to add this, let's just try real quick. Okay, so we've got that. And yeah, it just goes to the individual, so we can't assign it to like the 0.1 on that bus. Can we do any kind of LFE processing to just the LFE? Let's look at that. Categorized, surround, LFE filter, okay. So if I take this down to like 100, let's see if that affects my whole sound effects bus. And I need to listen to this.
Hey man, I'm gonna need that back. Deal is a deal.
No, it seems like it just filters the LFE, so that's what you'd have to do for that. Yeah, that's interesting. So good question, Simon. That's like pretty technical. I like that. I think I covered all the other questions. So pretty quiet chat, which is totally fine. We talked about this. I did my sales pitch on my website, which, by the way, thank you for everybody who has supported me by getting templates and stuff off my website. It really helps a lot, especially with work being slow. I do have work. I've got some work now. I've got a vertical project I'm working on, meaning it's shot vertically. And then I'm supposed to have another feature kind of stacked on top of that. So the drought, maybe there's a little bit of rain from the drought. But yeah, and then there's a couple other things in the works. The plugin, you know, I'm developing a couple plugins. The first one should be done pretty soon. But then I think that's it. I haven't had I've had no union work for probably a couple months. It's been pretty quiet out there. That's something I'd love to know from you guys. How's work been for you? Is it like, are you guys staying busy? Is it slow? You know, are you working on union, non-union stuff? Will the Pro Tools Atmos template work in studio? Good question. Well, let me see if Pro Tools Studio supports Dolby Atmos. Yeah, it looks like the new integrated Dolby Atmos render is included free in Pro Tools Studio, so it should work fine. But you know, I'd say if you get the Atmos template and it doesn't work for some reason, just let me know, and I'll either give you your money back or I'll help you figure it out. So it's not I'm not a stingy guy. You know, I'll help you with whatever issues you have on that. Yeah. So routing, let's just kind of briefly cover what we talked about. We talked about busing and how, you know, the leaves feed the branch, and the branch feeds the trunk of the tree, meaning the tracks are the leaves, the stem is the branch, and the mix is the trunk of the tree. You could even go down to the roots, I guess. But so this format for dialogue, music, sound effects, Foley, backgrounds, voiceover, whatever. Like usually it's three stems, dialogue, music, and effects, but sometimes you'll have more, sometimes less. So we talked about this general kind of overview of how busing is done in audio post-production. And then we talked about the specifics of how to do it in Fairlight, the Fairlight tab in DaVinci Resolve, including different bus formats. This is where you add the buses. You get 256. You can have more if you have like an accelerator card. I think it's like 2000 or something like that. Then we talked about assigning them to the tracks, which can be done in the bus assign or on the mixer panel in Fairlight by scrolling down to the bus outputs. We covered the difference between a bus send, which you would use for reverbs, something where you're going to mix the source signal with the wet signal. It's kind of like a wet-dry slider. But then we also covered outputs, which is where instead of routing these tracks to your speakers, you're routing them to a bus that then goes to your speakers eventually. But this allows you to send tracks where they need to go and be able to export things very easily. So in the delivery, right? This is called delivery, I think. Yeah, delivery tab. If you go to audio and you want to output wave files, like you're done with your mix, you're all good here, then you can just, you know, output everything right here all in one go. And that's one of the other benefits of routing, is being able to make deliverables without having to solo tracks. You know, you can just, there you've got your 5.1 stems, your 5.1 mix, 5.1 M&E, your stereo stems, your stereo mix, your stereo M&E, and oh, by the way, a web mix. So all 11 tracks in one go, and then you're done with the project. You can have a beer, have your coffee, and, you know, move on to the next one. So, like I said, this is all done for you on the template that I had on my website, which I closed wisely so I don't just be a salesman the whole time. And yeah, so that's kind of what we talked about. And that's it. 46 minutes. We're in and out. Get you guys on with your day. Thank you guys for tuning in for this. I've got more edited videos coming up. Actually need to sit down and make a couple more. I'll have another live stream next week. So if you have ideas for that, topics you want covered, just let me know. Leave a comment or send me a message, or however, smoke signals, however you want to give me your idea for a topic, and we'll talk about it. So it could be DaVinci, could be Pro Tools, can be microphones, can be headphones, gear. I'm not super into gear, but like whatever you guys want, that's what we're going to cover, because I want you guys to get value out of the channel. So thank you guys for tuning in. I will see you Thursday with an edited video, and then I'll see you Tuesday next week at 8 a.m. Pacific time for another live stream. Till then, take care.